Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Back in Business podcast. We're now on number 7. And the time has flown like you wouldn't believe.
It is flying very, very quickly. Can't believe we're here.
It's been a busy old week, hasn't it? There's lots going on in there with COVID and with Brexit and with everything else. It's just all very strange times at the moment.
Yeah, potentially going into another semi-lockdown with and keeping the number 6. It seems to be playing a large part in many conversations.
Indeed, although I'm not sure anybody really fully knows what it means. But there we go. Well, on today's podcast, we've got. I'm really excited. We've got a great guest on who's going to talk about mental health in the workplace and various other areas. We've got Paul McGregor. So without further ado, let's bring Paul in and we can have a chat. Hey, Paul.
Hey guys.
Hi, Paul.
How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. There's a bit of an echo, isn't there? But anyway, it doesn't matter. So obviously we haven't met before this. So just please tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So where do I start? Where do you want me to start? If we talk about kind of what I do now, so at the moment I'm a mental health campaigner. I've been campaigning for probably the last 3 years, using social media as a platform to get more people to talk about mental health, and that's come from sort of my own personal experience. I've done a lot of talks and workshops in organizations about mental health, such as Lloyd's TSB, Warner Brothers. Done some work with the FA and a couple of the England footballers, which was cool. And yeah, kind of really it's all been based off my own personal experience and my own journey of mental health. And I'm also the founder of Everymind.work.com, and what we try to do is support businesses via a unique mobile app that allows them to support their employees with mental health as well.
How does that work?
So I started developing it about 2 years ago. We launched in March. We actually accelerated the launch, and now we've partnered with about 85 businesses now. And it's basically an app that you can download from the App Store, but of course your company has to sign up first, and we brand it to the company. We can embed sort of your existing wellbeing initiatives into the platform. But really the idea of the platform is weekly content, a lot of education, allowing employees to almost manage their own mental health, and then working with the business to provide those anonymous analytics back to them to kind of help them with their wellbeing strategies moving forward. So yeah, we launched in March, which COVID definitely opened up the doors for a platform like ours. Yeah. We did have to accelerate a little bit, but it opened up the doors for a platform like ours. And it's been amazing to see the uptake on it and companies taking a more proactive approach to mental health.
It's so important as company owners ourselves. We have to deal with staff and people on a daily basis, and I don't think there's many people who could say they've never suffered from any mental health worries or issues at all. Just from the very sort of the lower level, just worrying about things, to the full level, depression, anxiety, and that sort of stuff. I think everybody suffers it from one time or another. We all have, particularly now with COVID, we all have ups and downs. And I'd say certainly for me, there's been an increase in the downs since we were on lockdown and working from home and that sort of stuff. Have you seen a significant increase in people asking you for help during this period?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's, if we're looking at this current situation, it's created a lot of uncertainty. And of course, that isn't good for mental health. But at the same time, I've seen the awareness of mental health accelerate dramatically over the last couple of months. Now all of a sudden we're talking about it. Now all of a sudden we're experiencing it. Now all of a sudden businesses are having to do more about mental health. And the conversation for me has shifted a little bit more from what's the ROI of mental health to we need to do something because it's the right thing to do. It's the human thing to do. So yeah, people are struggling, and I talk a lot about my own sort of journey and my own experiences of I sadly lost my dad to suicide when I was 18. And, for my dad, there was no warning signs. I always kind of say in my talks that mental illness was here and we were here. And what I mean by that is mental illness to me was straitjackets, padded cells, what I saw in Hollywood movies. And that wasn't my dad. That wasn't us. And only when it affects you, you realize, like you said, we all have mental health. We're all going to experience some sort of challenge along the way. And yeah, kind of, 2008 was a really tough time for businesses, and everyone. And 2009, when my dad ended his life, that year for suicides was very high. And the statistics that we're seeing of sort of last year, even though suicides are on the up, of course, if we're looking at the last recession, I do really worry for this year and next year as well. So it's something that we need to be focused on to prevent it from happening.
It was Suicide Awareness Day the other day, wasn't it? And I read some statistics that there's been a huge increase in the number of suicides in age 40s, which is very worrying. It's almost like the midlife crisis has taken a different route, and people aren't going buying sports cars and boats anymore, and they're struggling with mental health, which is a real worry.
Yeah, and I think not many people know this still, and it took me 5 or 6 years after I lost my dad to even know these statistics. Suicide's the biggest killer of men under 45 in the UK. Wow. So the way that I frame that is, the biggest threat to my life is myself. It's mental health. It's suicide. So why should I not be focused on it? Also, a biggest killer of young people is suicide. And even that's scary, right? And the way that I now look at it, we're not talking about a minority here. We're talking about a majority. This is the biggest killer of young people, the next generation. So definitely there's an issue that's happening, and we're not doing much about it. So that conversation is slowly shifting, but I think we need to get there a bit quicker.
So what can we do to help with businesses or individuals to give them this awareness, and what can we actually do to help them? What's the actual real, what can we put in the office and implement into our businesses to help and assist to make sure that these people don't commit suicide? And
I think the first thing is realizing how important it is. Still, let's be honest, I'm a business owner. We want to make sure cash flow is good. We want to make sure, profits coming in. And at the same time, we then don't invest in mental health, right? And we're seeing a lot more companies invest in mental health, which is good, and prioritizing it. There's been recent research. I don't know how much of this is accurate, but Deloitte put out a study that said for every £1 spent on mental health by businesses, they saw a return on investment of £5. And that's what's going to excite business owners, let's be honest, so just investing in it. But secondly, it's just keeping it simple. I think there's a massive realization that I had is just the power of vulnerability. I was very quiet about my own story. The way that I kind of explain it was I didn't talk to anyone about my dad for 3 years, wore the mask, got drunk most weekends, buried my head in the laptop to build a business, worked, bought a nice car, all of that. And then 3 years later, I'm like, my pain is still there. I want it to disappear. And very fortunately, I got some help. And after that, it still took me another 6 years to start vocalizing it more on a public platform. But I then realized the power of people talking about their own stories. And the example that I always share is I walked into a construction company with like 100 builders, all in their outfits, like ready to talk about my story, big guys. And I thought these guys are just going to heckle me out the room. And I was making a prejudgment of them, like this isn't going to go down well. I spoke about my story, my own challenges. I then had a queue of about 20 of them, all one by one, talking about maybe someone had attempted suicide, one of their best friends had taken their own life, someone was on antidepressants, and it was just story after story after story. So I think with businesses, it's about encouraging those conversations. If an employee has experienced it, give them the platform if they feel comfortable to talk about it. Because what then happens is another employee says, "Oh, I didn't know that about Stephen." So I'm going to now talk about my problems, and now that becomes more of an open culture and an open environment. It doesn't make mental health go away, but it definitely makes your employees feel a little bit more safer to talk about how they feel as well.
So this goes along the line of problem shared is problem halved is problem shared.
Yeah, exactly. And definitely there's a massive argument, and it's very hard to get that sort of senior buy-in, but they do say that the more senior the person is, the better. Because, let's be honest, we all look at sort of senior leaders as people that wear capes and they've got no problems wrong with them at all. So, you know, if they can be very honest about their mental health, then other people can too. But also as well, there's amazing free resources out there, you know, that again, not a lot of people know about, sort of, you know, hotlines and SMS services and, you know, tons of stuff that charities are doing that just needs a bit more awareness. So yeah, definitely opening up the conversation is the first thing that I would suggest.
There's definitely been a huge step change though, because I know myself, like my parents' generation, they wouldn't dream of talking about, you know, or certainly whilst they were at work, they wouldn't dream about going to their bosses and talking about mental health. And it was always seen as a very negative thing. You know, you don't want to be seen to be weak. You're never going to get promoted if you can't deal with the stress and the issues and that sort of stuff. And I think that mindset has changed significantly with our generation. I think people are generally more willing to talk about it than previously. And you know, that's a bit of a general statement, because there are plenty of people who don't talk, who you know, they don't communicate with people. Me personally, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I just tell everybody everything. But I think, you know, there's a risk of bottling things up, and that is ultimately what causes problems going forward. So I think it's a matter for us as business owners to promote that and make people aware that, you know, it's not a weakness. We can help. We're there. We want to help, because it's in nobody's interest to let people suffer. That's the reality of it, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's like what we're trying to do at Everymind, and me as well, you know. So Everymind at work, we're trying to focus on that proactive approach rather than that reactive approach. And the kind of way that I speak about it in my own talks is, you know, when we're looking at mental health and physical health, they're very different, but everyone can agree we all have physical health, we all have mental health. And let's be honest, from a very young age, we are conditioned that we have to proactively manage our physical health, because if we don't, we're going to become physically unwell, right? So I was taught, eat an apple a day, keep the doctor away, right? I was taught, drink loads of water, eat healthily, you know, exercise, don't eat these kind of foods because you're going to become physically unwell. With mental health, it's like, ignore it until it gets really bad and then do something about it. And when we're looking at that reactive approach, that's dangerous, you know, because when my dad, as an example, who reacted when it was almost too late, by that time, it's very, very difficult for that person to potentially get the help that they need. If my dad potentially got the help that he needed 3 or 4 years before his suicide, you know, things could have been very different for all of us. And I think as a business, and what we're seeing is businesses are still very reactive. You know, this was about 2 years ago, and things have changed, but I got told once, if you're going to come into our organization and share your story, are you going to open up a can of worms, right? Are you going to open up a can of worms? Is stuff going to then be said that we don't really want people talking about? And that's the kind of, you know, that's the kind of approach we've taken as a business. There's no mental health problems here. Everyone gets to work fine. So we're going to ignore it. And then all of a sudden, oh no, someone has potentially, you know, ended their life or made an attempt, or now they're struggling. Now we need to do something about it. So it's more that proactive approach as a business, as an individual, than the kind of reactive one that we're all known to do.
So I mean, as insolvency practitioners, we obviously deal with people in debt on a daily basis, and you know, we're acutely aware that as it stands at the moment, the economy is very uncertain. There's risks of further lockdown and all that sort of stuff. And you know, there must be business owners out there who are lying awake and they're worrying about what the future holds for their business. The cash flow issues, they've lost trade, and all that sort of stuff. And we're really trying to promote, you know. Yes, there is a perception of insolvency practitioners being very negative and wanting to close businesses, but actually we can help. You know, we can help to restructure businesses, turn them around, and give the right advice. And we're saying to people, you know, look, don't bury your head in the sand. Come and talk to us now and deal with it at an early stage. And you know, hopefully that can avoid the worry and the catastrophizing and the over analysis that can lead to the sort of things like depression and anxiety. You know.
Yeah, no, financial well-being is massively linked to, I believe, mental well-being. You know, my dad was someone who was very obsessed with money, right? And you know, almost his identity got tied up in money. And he was a hardworking engineer, so he wasn't a wealthy guy, but at the same time, you know, he saved for that early retirement at 50 and sadly ended his life at 45. And I think, you know, the financial impact of, as I say, sort of 2008 definitely had an impact on him. And yeah, we're seeing it a lot now as well. And I think it comes down to that almost entrapment and not being in control. You know, let's be honest, I think we all want to be in control. And when something like this happens and we're not, and we feel entrapped and we can't see that way out of it, it definitely leaves us in very sort of, you know, bad, dire situation. So I think it's good what you're doing, and we've just teamed up with an organization as well that offers sort of free financial well-being workshops, because I think it's massively important in relation to mental well-being.
And more than ever in today's current climate with social media as it is, and there's more and more pressure on not only adults but the children as well to keep up with their keep up with the Joneses and keep up with their mates. They want the best trainers, they want the best cars, they want the biggest houses and all that sort of stuff. And there must be so many people out there who live beyond their means. And that in itself is a real worry, because, like, as you say, financial pressures must be a huge cause of anxiety and mental health issues. And in fact, it kind of links in with the highest suicide rate for over under 45s, not because just that constant pressure to be able to keep up with people and to support your family and leave a legacy and all that sort of stuff. And that as business owners, we have to be aware of that, and we have to try and help people when they're in that situation.
Yeah.
So you obviously you do quite a lot of talks around the country and that sort of stuff. So what is it, mainly businesses or individuals? Are you a therapist yourself, or a counselor, or?
No, so I just share on personal experience. So yeah, I kind of started by doing talks for sort of charities and anyone who would have me, right? Events, mental health events, etc. And then that kind of just translated into the workplace as I did more and more on social media and LinkedIn. Companies were reaching out saying, hey, can you come and do a talk? So doing talks to companies of maybe like 10 all the way up to, like I say, Lloyd's, TSB and Warner Brothers and kind of bigger sort of scaled organizations or workshops with senior managers, etc. So I kind of did that for a while, and then, like I said, I saw there was a need for. It's great me being stood here in Lloyd's TSB talking to 100 people, but like, how do I reach every single employee with that personal experience element, with something that's a bit more anonymous? Because when I said to them, hey, have any of you suffered with mental health, the stigma means that people don't put their hands up. So that's kind of where Everymind sort of derived from. But even though we have the app, we still deliver workshops, webinars, etc. on that back end. But really kind of give the business, instead of a business, and what I see with mental health and well-being is there's not a lot of research on it. So what a lot of companies do is they kind of throw mud at a wall and hope that it sticks. We'll do this webinar, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. We'll get an EAP, and a lot of, especially the smaller businesses, you haven't really got that money to kind of test and experiment. So what we're trying to do is, with the analytics that we've got, we're saying, hey, in the last sort of 4 weeks, we're seeing an increase in sort of searches for anxiety, and we're seeing, more content being looked at when it comes to anxiety. So what we can do is we can help you with this workshop, that et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of giving them that insight. And if they don't want to use us, that's fine, but kind of giving them a viewpoint of where their employees are currently at.
How did you come up with the idea of creating the app?
I don't know. I think it was just sort of seeing that need in the market. And my first business was in the fashion business, believe it or not, wearing a t-shirt. So that's that. I mean, digital marketing, fashion, in the fashion business is like you have to change an idea every week. It's so fast paced. And when I started to do content around mental health, people were still kind of focused on the radio and the TV. And it was kind of, as you said, social media's got a very bad rap. Social media isn't very good for mental health, but at the same time, social media has allowed me to create that kind of awareness around a subject that I don't think I would have been allowed to do, maybe 20, 30 years ago. The kind of idea came from doing the talk, seeing a bit of a gap, and kind of then looking at my previous businesses, the kind of more digital ones, and trying to create a solution for it.
And I take your point about social media. It definitely has positive uses without any shadow of a doubt. I think whether it's regulated sufficiently and whether things are taken down fast enough, I'm doubtful. It was only last week that there was this thing on TikTok going around. I mean, I didn't see the video myself, but I saw the warnings out there. I've got a 10-year-old daughter who's on TikTok all the time, and I had to say to her, look, you mustn't look at this sort of stuff. But the truth is, it should be dealt with much quicker, and the technology's out there and the algorithms are out there to deal with these things straight off and not allow them to be shared. And I think that's where I think it falls down a little bit.
But Twitter, social media also provides a platform for the haters as well, which causes the mental health issues as well, which needs to be dealt with swiftly.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I just think social media accelerates what used to happen when I was at school, right? You know, all of this stuff used to happen. People would have like a video on like, I don't know, on their old phones or
showing your age now. We didn't have phones.
When I say a video on their phone, so I'm 30, so you'd have like a really rubbish video, and then like even bullying, right? Bullying always existed, but I think social media, as you've said, Stephen, it just kind of accelerates a little bit more. Instead of me being bullied,
and it's more anonymous as well.
I'm being bullied. Yeah, I'm being bullied at home, or I'm being bullied by John Joe's 91 in the Philippines. You know,
but it's not just that as well. At school, when you know, I'm happy to admit, or not happy to admit, but I suffered quite bad bullying at school, and the difference is when you leave school at 3:30, you walk away from it and it doesn't continue. Whereas with phones and social media, it's just non-stop. You know, WhatsApp groups and Snapchats and everything else, you can't get away from it. And that must be absolutely horrendous when you're in what I would call your safe place at home in bed at night and you've got your phone still beeping away and people having a go. And
well, the actual phone is probably more of a mental health issue in itself, because people are so addicted to them. It's untrue. You know, it's on you, that people are on them constantly and worried about what's coming on, what's going on, what's happening.
Anymore. You can't even work. You can't switch off anymore unless you're that good that you can put it in a drawer when you get home and leave it, which I would say 99% of people don't.
Well, they say they do, but they don't.
You always look at your emails. You even when you go on holiday nowadays, your emails are there. But then again, on the other side of that, when I go on holiday, I like to keep on top of my emails so that I know when I get back, I'm not worried about when I go back and I've got a whole pile of them that I have to deal with. So it swings and roundabouts.
I think a lot of these topics that we're discussing already, so you've got mental health, spoken about financial sort of well-being and you know, how do we deal with being in debt as an example, social media, like those three things, let's be honest, if we go all the way back, we're not taught about any of them in schools, right? We're not educated on them. So I always talk about mental health when it came to knowing every planet in the universe. I'd already kind of researched that and, you know, studied it and remembered it. But when it comes to dealing with the grief of my dad, I had nothing. I had to kind of figure that out myself, you know, and same with finances, you know, when it comes to finances, and I was in a bit of credit card debt and all of that, you know, I didn't have any education on that. You have to figure it out yourself. Social media, we've been thrown into this social media world with zero education, and we're all trying to figure it out ourselves. So I think education is massively key for all of these. And I know they're dabbling in it in the school system. Like I've got 2 young kids, but like I don't think there's enough being done for mental health, financial health, you know, kind of looking at, you know, social media and the impacts of it, self-esteem, like all of this kind of ties into self-esteem. There was a recent research study that I looked into, which I thought was really interesting, that said, when you're on social media and you're scrolling, you feel very alone. Even though you're connected all the time. So it's like, even though we're the most connected generation, we're the loneliest generation. But the study also then showed that if you had high self-esteem and you didn't feel lonely, that social media didn't have that impact on you. So almost in a way, it's like looking at the core of it and trying to help people with self-esteem, as well as educating them on social media, rather than just seeing social media as the issue, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's a bit controversial, and I suppose I'm saying it to be controversial, but there is a school of thought that at schools, if you talk about it too much, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. Kids particularly, if you talk about mental health, that can create mental health worries for them, and they can become anxious about things that actually they'd never even thought about before. And so there is definitely a fine balance in my view. I'm talking from my own experience, my own kids. There's a fine balance between talking about it at school and teaching them about it, but also making sure that they know it's, you know, I don't know how to put it, but they know it's not going to happen. It's not necessarily going to happen to them, and they don't need to worry about it because it can cause further anxiety. That's the concern.
Yeah, and I think it's doing it in the right way, isn't it? You know, I don't believe that, especially young children, I don't believe we should be talking about mental illnesses. You know, there's always people say, oh, that people should know what schizophrenia is at a young age. I don't necessarily agree with that myself. You know, because I think, as you say, that can then cause a bit of, you know, concern and anxiety around it. But it's just emotions. You know, how do you deal with bit of worry.
Yeah.
How do you deal with, you know, stress? How do you deal with that kind of level of emotions, rather than
It's the
looking at
emotional
mental health?
well-being
Exactly.
as opposed to the clinical definitions of
Exactly.
It's also making sure the teachers are trained to spot it as well.
Yeah, which they're not, right? Let's be honest. And that's nothing on the teachers. A good friend of mine, Ben West, is a campaigner as well. He lost his brother, sadly, to suicide. I think his brother was only sort of 15 or 16. And there was obviously a lot of issues there with the schools. And I think he said every teacher has to be trained with, is it the EpiPen, if someone's
Yeah.
had an allergic reaction? So every teacher has to be trained with it. But obviously the biggest threat to every student's life is suicide. You know, and no teacher, or not no teacher, but it's not mandatory. It's not something that they're focused on. And that's not kind of putting more expectation and pressure on teachers, but I think it is just that basic awareness and basic understanding. Rather, you know, we're not trying to make every teacher a clinical professional, you know, someone who knows how to dramatically help someone, but it's just that awareness stage, which I think can dramatically help the teachers.
Well,
and schools as well.
it's really important, because we've got to remember the teachers probably spend more time with our children than we do. In many respects, they get to know them well, they see them day in, day out, and so I do think it's very important
being able to make them open up to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit of a loaded question, I suppose, but and probably a ridiculous one. But if there's anybody suffering from anxiety, you know, when you wake up in the morning with that horrible feeling in your stomach, what advice would you give to these people? What's the one thing that you would recommend to try and help ease that anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's a loaded question. It's a very hard question as well, because obviously, you know, this is one of the issues why I don't think it gets taught as much and there's not much awareness around it. Is because it's so individual as well. You know, like the way I deal with my anxiety, it might be very different to the way that Rob deals with his anxiety. You know, and it's so individual. But I think the core of it always comes back to that whole, and it's very cliche, and I don't like saying it, but you know, you aren't alone with it, and I think that feeling of anxiety, you know, you can do these, you know, proactive strategies of, it could be, you know, a walk in the morning, it could be journaling, writing down whatever's going on in your mind, it could be mindfulness, it could be, you know, there's tons of stuff that we can do for our anxiety. But at the same time, I think the core of it always comes down to that feeling alone and feeling like we can't talk about it, and judging ourselves because we're feeling this certain way. So I think the key thing for me is always to kind of, you know, speak openly about it, whether that's to a friend, to a spouse, to a therapist, to just someone, or whether that's for a lot of people, especially guys in particular. You know, for men, it's a WhatsApp message to my mate. Hi, you know, just letting you know, Rob, I'm not feeling too good like this week. And then my mate goes, hey, do you want to go for a beer? And then by the time we're in the pub, like the ice has already been broken. Rather than me sitting in, you know, eye contact in a pub trying to open up to him. You know, it's writing it down, you know, potentially keeping it to myself for a week and then giving it to my wife and then getting her to read it. There's so many ways that we can open up, but it is that key, just try and push yourself to talk about it to someone. Know that it doesn't make you weak. Know that I'm sure on that other end, the person has been through something potentially the same, or know someone who has. You know, there are so many people out there, as you say, that have experienced this. So the more open you can be, the better.
It's certainly one of the areas that I find is very helpful as a sort of a quick fix, if there is such a thing, is breathing. Because I know anxiety and panic is very much related to breathing and oxygen levels and all that sort of stuff. So, and it's something that you can do if you're even if you're in a meeting and you suddenly start feeling anxious. Something you can do without anybody noticing. And it really does work.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a lot of breathing exercises in the app as well, and one of my favorite ones is the 4-2-6. So you breathe in for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. And like you said, it's people neglect it because they think it's too simple, but you do that a couple of times and you already start to feel a lot calmer.
Even when you're driving, you can do it when you're driving, and you know, it makes. That is actually my favorite technique in terms of, I'd say, like a sort of a quick fix just to calm you down if you suddenly start feeling very anxious or whatever it may be. So
exactly. And I think that falls in nicely with the whole advice of talking to someone about it, because the way that I kind of see breathing techniques and everything, and you know, I've done loads, is almost, they sometimes become a kind of a plaster or a band-aid on the problem that we're trying to sort of, you know, hide away from. And they're all good and they all serve us, but at the same time, I think we do need to kind of get to that root cause as well. That why are we feeling anxious? Why are we having these panic attacks? You know, why am I, you know, feeling this way? So for me, it is that sort of it's that kind of both sides of it, you know, try and get it off your chest, try and speak to someone, try and get that professional help, get to the root cause of it, whilst also doing your daily coping strategies, your journaling, your meditation, your mindfulness, etc., etc. So hopefully that helps. But like you say, it's so individual to everyone.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I think I could probably talk with you for another 2 hours easily.
All right, cool.
That's the context of the conversation. Just keep on talking.
Well,
exactly, right.
I must say, I just find all this absolutely fascinating. I really do, and it is of interest to me as well. So, you know, I'd be really chuffed if maybe in a couple of months you'll come on again.
100%.
You know,
let's connect.
We'll know a little bit more about COVID and the economy and all that sort of stuff, and I think we'll be able to have some really useful, helpful conversations. So we'd definitely like to have you back on again in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to come back on. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time out as well, having me.
And we'll definitely give you a call and talk to you about the app as well.
Cool, let's do it.
Cool.
Just remind us of the name of the app again.
The app is Everymind at Work, so everymindatwork.com, and we're doing a free 3-month trial at the moment for businesses signing up.
That's brilliant.
Perfect.
Absolutely brilliant. Great.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
All right, guys.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
Wow. Fascinating.
That's something different, that, isn't it?
It is. I think it's, like I say, it's really important that people deal with it. And again, I'll reiterate, it's really important that business owners deal with these things head on, and you know, take professional advice. Don't bury your head in the sand. And
you're not. And from the context of that, you're not alone. You know, it happens to everybody. You know, as you said, walking into a construction site, thinking, what am I doing here? You know, no one's going to be able to relate to what I'm saying, and he has queues of people coming to talk to him.
Yeah,
so,
that's it. That's it.
Anybody, but everyone can suffer from mental health problems. The black dog of society. So
there we go, and that's another week done.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for watching and for listening. We really hope you found it as interesting as we did. If while you're listening, you're interested in coming in and talking about your experiences, please feel free to drop us a line. We'd be delighted to have you on. All right.
Okay. Take care now. Bye.